Mark 4:35. On that day, when evening had come, he said to them, "Let us go across to the other side." And leaving the crowd, they took him with him in the boat just as he was. And other boats were with him. And a great windstorm arose, and the waves were breaking into the boat, so that the boat was already filling. But he was in the stern asleep on the cushion. And they woke him and said to him, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" And he awoke and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, "Peace, be still." And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. He said to them, "Why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith?" And they were filled with great fear and said to one another, "Who then is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him?" They came to the other side of the sea, to the country of the Gerasenes. And when Jesus had stepped out of the boat, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit. He lived among the tombs, and no one could bind him any more, not even with a chain, for he had often been bound with shackles and chains, but he wrenched the chains apart, and he broke the shackles in pieces. No one had the strength to subdue him. Night and day, among the tombs and on the mountains, he was always crying out and cutting himself with stones. And when he saw Jesus from afar, he ran and fell down before him. And crying out with a loud voice, he said, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I adjure you by God, do not torment me." For he was saying to him, "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." And Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" He replied, "My name is Legion, for we are many." And he begged him earnestly not to send them out of the country. Now a great herd of pigs was feeding there on the hillside, and they begged him, saying, "Send us into the pigs, let us enter them." So he gave them permission. And the unclean spirits came out and entered the pigs. And the herd, numbering about 2,000, rushed down the steep bank into the sea and drowned in the sea. The herdsmen fled and told it in the city and in the country. And the people came to see what it was that had happened. And they came to Jesus and saw the demon-possessed man, the one who had the legion, sitting there clothed in his right mind, and they were afraid. And those who had seen it described to them what had happened to the demon-possessed man and to the pigs. And they began to beg Jesus to depart from their region. As he was getting in the boat, the man who had been possessed with demons begged him that he might be with him. And he did not permit him, but said to him, "Go home to your friends and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you." And he went away and began to proclaim in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him. And everyone marveled. So our series is, Are You Following Jesus? And we're going through the gospel according to Mark. And we know Mark got his information from Peter. So what you're seeing here is an eyewitness account of what Jesus was doing. And you're seeing people follow him, so we're kind of paralleling that with us because we want to follow him as well. So the title this morning is How Jesus Creates Conviction Through Chaos. How does Jesus use a chaotic world to deepen conviction about him? So realize what's been going on. Jesus has been teaching many things, hasn't he? He's talking parable after parable after parable after parable. And these disciples, they've been listening. In fact, they're not just listening. They've had home Bible studies, right? They've sat down with Jesus and asked him specifically, what does this mean? And they've answered, and he's answered them. So to some degree, they think they understand some things, and what they understand is in their head. They've learned some things. But the Christian life isn't just about learning things. It's about learning things about Jesus. It's about experiencing Jesus himself. So head knowledge doesn't necessarily mean you have conviction. If you think about it, what is it that has developed conviction in your life? Just think about that for a minute. What things have happened to you that you now have more conviction about Christ and what he's able to do? How about your children's sins? In seeing that and going through those things with your kids all the way up, do you have now a greater conviction of what Jesus is actually capable of doing? Because you've seen him change some of your children, right? In fact, you've seen some of your children going a direction that you wondered if they'd ever return from. And now what do you know? You know Christ can bring people back. You know Christ can save. Some of us are developing conviction because some of our parents, including me, don't believe. So I am pressured or tested by parents at times that make me say, okay, well, what do I really believe about this? Because they're not going along with this. And when you're young, that's a little more difficult because you're having to decide now, what is Jesus saying? What are they saying? And if there's a difference, what do I do? Or you think of you're going to join a church, right? Some of you have been going to this membership class. And what's your question in coming to a membership class? What are the convictions of this church? What do they believe? What are these people? What are they not going to compromise on? That's what you want to know. And let me just ask you, how did we come up with these? How did we come up with things like Jesus is God, he's fully God, and he's fully man? How did we come up with that? I mean, yes, the Bible says it. that the Godhead is three persons in one God. That the church should have leaders, plurality of leaders. That men should lead their homes. How do we come up with these things? And how did we come to these kind of conclusions? And typically in church history, what you find is the reason we've come to these convictions is because people challenged them. Right? I mean, how did the church spread initially? They were all gathered in Jerusalem having a little happy party. Look at all of us. We're all believers now, and we're from all over the place because they came there for Passover, and the Spirit fell, and they're loving each other like, this is great. People are selling their homes. They're living together, all this kind of stuff. They're depending on one another. Well, how did that end? Persecution came, and the church spread. So understand, that's what God is planning for you. He is going to use storms in your life, troubles in your life, to develop convictions you don't have yet. Some of you have seen the powerful working of Christ when you've lost your job. Some of you have seen Christ work powerfully through your cancer. Some of you have seen Christ work powerfully through COVID. Church is still meeting, right? So what Jesus knows is that pressure deepens our faith. Pressure deepens our faith. Opposition can actually build faith. Did you know needs can also develop convictions? I mean, you want more needs? Nobody's going to say, yeah, I want to lack some more things. But yet that's exactly what Jesus is going to do so that you can see him provide in ways that you never imagined. So how is Jesus going to develop conviction in you and make you useful? Because trust me, you need conviction in order to be useful. I was talking to a friend of mine recently, and we were talking about Romans 6. You guys all know Romans 6. Romans 6 is when it says, consider yourselves what? Dead to sin and alive to God in Christ Jesus. And we were talking about that, and he was saying, how do you do that? How do you consider? I mean, it means to really believe that you're done with sin. How do you do that? Well, the answer to that is to be convicted and convinced and certain about what God is calling you to do. Luther said it this way: love God and sin boldly. In other words, your focus is how am I pleasing God? How do I want to serve Christ? How has Christ called me to minister to his people, to share my faith in these things? You focus on that constantly. Let that be the big thing in your life, and you will be considering yourself dead to sin. Not because you don't see it, but because it's losing its interest because you have a greater interest, and that is to please Christ and to be Christ-like. So, what is conviction? And how does the Lord develop conviction in the Christian life? So let me just give you a quick definition of what conviction is. It is a strong persuasion. It is a firmly held belief. It means to be convinced. And so what I want to show you this morning is how the Lord is developing conviction in these people, because you can parallel what's going on here with your own life very easily. So what we're going to look at first is the conviction of the disciples. The conviction of the disciples. So, notice verse 35. He said to them, "Let us go across to the other side." Now, what's going on there? He's leading the disciples into a storm. Trust me. Jesus has led you into storms, and he will continue to lead you into storms. And there's a purpose for it. And the purpose you'll see at the end of this little section. But notice also, it says in 36, "And leaving the crowd, they took him with them in the boat just as he was, and the other boats were with him." So one of the ways that Jesus is going to develop conviction in your life is by you being with him. You need to see your circumstances. In your circumstances, you need to see that Christ is there. Go make disciples of all nations. And what's he say? I am with you always, even to the end of the age. So what Christ is going to do, he's going to develop conviction, but he isn't going to leave you. But you might think he doesn't care. Right? You might think, Jesus, you're falling asleep on the job. I don't know that this is right. I don't know that this should be happening. And that's exactly what they're experiencing here. And what is their problem? Let me just tell you what their problem is, because their problem is our problem. You know what their problem is? Their problem isn't that Jesus can heal people. They've seen that. Peter saw it at his own house. Hundreds of people were healed by Jesus. They don't doubt that he can heal. They're convinced of that. They bring people to Jesus and say, he needs help. They know what he can do. They know he can teach, right? Because right here, he says, "Teacher, don't you care that we are perishing? Teacher, don't you care that we're perishing?" You know why they would perish if that's all he was, if he was just a teacher. What's their problem? They don't know who this is. And this is what we do. We fall into the same thing. We get so enamored with what Jesus does that we forget about who he is. Because when things aren't doing or going smooth, we forget who he is. Because we're always thinking, well, what's he doing? This doesn't seem right. But you got to remember who he is. Who he is determines what he does. So knowing who he is far more important than just knowing what he does. We'll see that here. So Jesus is, what's he doing there? He's got conviction. Look at that. He's asleep. What's his conviction? His conviction, he'll say later as he's leading these men, and he will say, "Thank you, Lord of heaven and earth." Where storms come from? Heaven. He's thanking his Father, who is Lord of heaven and earth. And you know what he's thanking him for? This is later when he's talking to the disciples. You can read it in Matthew 11. But what he's doing is he's thanking God for his plan, for his sovereignty. He's thanking God for that. That's why he can sleep. That's why he can rest. He can rest because he knows what God is doing. And God is revealing himself through him. So you can rest because you know what God's doing. God is revealing himself through the person of Jesus Christ. And that is your main thing that you're to be doing and have conviction about. Jesus came here to reveal the Father. And Jesus tells us to preach him so that he can reveal the Father. So Jesus wakes up and actually tells the wind and the waves to do what he was doing. Peace, be still. And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. He said to them, why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith? And they were filled with great fear and said to one another, who then is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him? Why did they go through this? They went through this. Jesus brought them through this. Jesus brought them into the storm and through the storm for one reason: to show them how little they know him. Right out of their own mouth. It comes out of their own mouth. What they need to learn came out of their own mouth. Who then is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him? Now you want to see something amazing? Is the next chapter tells them who this is. And notice who tells them who this is in the next chapter. Look at verse 7. And crying out with a loud voice, he said, what have you to do with us, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? Just be in the boat for a minute, right? These guys are all wet, and they've just docked, and they're exhausted. And here comes a naked, scarred, maybe bloody man running toward them. And at that point, they forgot they were wet, they forgot they were exhausted, and now they see this. And out of this guy's mouth, the question is answered. Who then is this? And out of the tombs comes screaming who this is that was in their boat. This is who is in your boat. This is why we need to be in awe of Jesus more than just collecting information and notebooks about him. You need to be in awe of him. The purpose of your notes, the purpose of Scripture is to put you in awe and tell you, who is this? What you see here is that Jesus has all authority over your circumstances. He has all authority over your circumstances, and what he's going to do is show you that he's greater than you thought. Right? That's exactly what they had discovered. Teacher, no. Lord of heaven and earth, no. The Most High God, Son of the Most High God. See, what I want you to see this morning is that Jesus is greater than you've thought. That's what Jesus is teaching his disciples. Jesus is teaching his disciples that he has authority over all their circumstances. So now let's look at the conviction. We looked at the conviction of the disciples, right? They were convicted about what? They don't know who this is. They thought they knew, but now they're sure they don't know because they've never seen a rabbi do that, right? And sometimes that's the conviction we need to have. We need to, if Jesus hasn't gotten bigger to you from when you first were saved, this is what Jesus is showing you. He needs to get bigger for you. Listen, he didn't just have the power to forgive you of the sin you did up to the point you believed. He has power to forgive you of every sin onward. The cross was sufficient for every future sin you will ever commit. He is sufficient for everything you will ever need, and all the strength you'll need, and all the wisdom you need, everything you need, he's big enough for. I mean, you didn't need a whole lot of big things when you were 6. So sure, Jesus could take care of me. But as life goes on, you have more challenges and more responsibilities and tougher situations. Christ has to be enough for you, and that's what he's showing. He's showing the disciples. And I just got to say one more thing about this section with him convicting the disciples. Where does he do this? Where does he bring chaos to show them that they don't know Christ? He brings it in a very familiar setting. These people, a number of them were people who lived on boats, right? They fished. They got up in the morning really early and went out on a boat. They had been in, how many storms you think they'd been in? They've been in many, 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 many storms. Where does Jesus deepen your conviction? He's going to deepen it in your own life, in your own house, at your own job, with your own children, with your own parents. This is the way he works. He knows where you are, and he's there with you. And so he is going to cause you to see how much greater he is at your address, where you live, where you work, in your family, among your family members. He is going to show you that he's greater than you've thought he was. And that's what happened with these disciples, and that was the conviction of the disciples, that they're wondering if they even know who this is. And then you have the conviction of the demons. Just think about it. What's their conviction? They've got this man under their control, and he sees Jesus. Now, I'm telling you, I don't think it's just the man who's seeing Jesus here, right? I don't think this man thought, hey, there's Jesus. Do you know this man is probably a Gentile and probably never saw Jesus ever? But whatever is motivating this man, whatever is controlling this man, saw Jesus from afar and ran and fell down before him. Okay, you guys got to get the amazing thing that's going on here. Okay, anybody here like boxing or UFC or those kind of events? I don't care if you do or not. Here's the illustration. You got a match, right? A boxing match or a fight that's about to happen. Okay, and the guy who's going to fight is like Mike Tyson. Okay? This guy, fighters don't want to fight him. Okay? So he's in the ring. Now, one of us say, okay, somehow someone talked us into fighting Mike Tyson. Okay? Just think about that for a minute. What are you going to do when they open the gate to let you in to the ring, right? And you go in there, what will you do? You'll do what this guy did. You'll say, that's okay, I'm going down. I'll go down, don't have to even hit me, right? That's what's going on here. The point is, a legion of demons, which is about 6,000, is no match for him. How many is 6,000? If you filled up Bayside, the worship center at Bayside, that's 2,000 people. Triple that. And pretend all those are demons. And that's what Jesus is facing here. Ellen was telling me there's about 6,000 people at Franchise Tax Board, right? That would mean that everybody at Franchise, that's how many demons are in this one man. Now here's the amazing thing. It's not, see, I don't know, you hear this sermon preached a lot and everybody's amazed at how bad off this guy is. But the real amazing thing here isn't how bad off he is. The amazing thing here is Jesus is just standing there, hasn't done hardly anything but say, he was saying to them, come out of the man, you unclean spirit. So this guy comes running and he's got 6,000 demons in him. 6,000 demons come up to Jesus and it's not even a match. They fall at his feet. You really think your problems are bigger than him? These are supernatural beings. These aren't human beings. These are supernatural. And they're at his feet. In fact, this passage is replete with when Jesus shows up places, everybody's begging him. Have you noticed that? Look at verse 6. They ran and fell down. Look at verse 7. I adjure you by God. He's begging. I adjure you by God, do not torment me. Look at 10. He begged him. Look at 12. They begged him. Look at 17. They begged Jesus. Look at 18. He begged him. The man with the demons begged him. You see, what is the point of this passage? Is who Jesus is. Do you see? It's who he is. And if you have conviction about who he is, truly who he is, you don't fear. You're not worried. You can sleep through the storm. You can know that 6,000 can't take him out. In fact, isn't it amazing? He doesn't do it. He's just there. And these evil beings panic. You know the demons speak, right? You know, they're saying to each other, that's the tormentor. That's the one who's going to torment us. And so they run and they beg because they know they will never survive him. This is your leader. This is your God. This is the one you need to have conviction about. You need to have conviction about him. Nobody has any chance against him. He is awesome. People, best place to be is at his feet, begging. So, what are the demons convicted about? They're convicted that he is Jesus. They're convicted that he is the Son of the Most High God. They're convicted that they will be tormented by him. They are convicted that if they don't get permission, they can't go anywhere. And so Jesus gives them permission. Isn't that amazing? I mean, this isn't even, nobody would pay for this kind of fight. There's no challenge. It's like me going into the ring to fight Mike Tyson, and I say, "Oh, can I get you something to eat?" Hey, can I leave it yet? It's you are so aware of who he is, and they are absolutely aware of who Jesus is, and all they want to do is get away from him. And so they ask, let us go into these pigs. $1,200,000 ran off that cliff in our day. $1,200,000. And in an agricultural community where they don't have IBM and Mac and Apple and all these major companies where people just sit around and push buttons, this is a major loss for the community. Is it possible that Jesus cares more for one soul than the financial status of an entire community? How much does God care for your soul? He gave his son. So this is nothing. But notice what the priority and the conviction of the community is. Look at verse 14. The herdsmen fled and told about Jesus. Is that what it says? The herdsmen fled and told it in the city and in the country. And the people came to see what it was that happened. And they came to Jesus and saw the demon-possessed man, the one who had legion, sitting there, clothed in his right mind, and they were afraid. And those who had seen it described to them what had happened to the demon-possessed man and the pigs. Okay, so we talked about the conviction of the disciples. We talked about the conviction now of the demons. Now the conviction of the Decapolis, of this district. What's their conviction? Their conviction is that something happened. And their conviction is that this guy did it. right? That's their conviction. Now, many Christians are this way. I am convinced about it. That Jesus could do it, that he's done it, that he is this, that he has done this, and that he has done that. But there's a big difference between being convinced about what he can do and who he is. Because understand, who you are determines what you do. So if you just think, wow, that was amazing, and it's even kind of scary, because these people are scared now, they're afraid. Notice, same thing happened to these people that happened to the guys in the boat, right? They were afraid, they didn't like this. They didn't like the storm, right? And the community didn't like the demon-possessed guy. They were scared of both those, right? They didn't like either one of those. Jesus shows up, and it says, now they're afraid of him. But notice the conviction of these is the conviction that this shouldn't have happened. He shouldn't have done this. But are they doubting that he did it? No. They're convicted. They're sure who did this. That's why they asked him to leave. So can you have conviction and not be saved? Yes, but please understand, my trajectory this morning is to help you understand that the conviction you need is the conviction that comes from the faith that you have. Not that you just, because there's many unbelievers who have convictions like these people. Their conviction was, we can't lose that kind of money. They're seeing, listen, it doesn't say they went up to that man. It says they saw him. They knew who he was. Where's the party for this guy? They were willing to chain him, but they weren't willing to celebrate when he was free. I would argue that the Decapolis was maybe more lost than the demon-possessed man, and maybe even more blind than the demons. They're not seeing it the way it is. Please don't look at your God, I know many of you grew up and believe this whole idea that God is sovereign. I do too, but you don't look at him just as sovereign. You need to look at him as immanent, as close, as drawing near, as personal. That's so important. Because so much of the time we see things that we can't control and we throw our hands up and we say, well, I don't know, God's in control and he's doing good. He's your father. He's your father, he's your brother. So there's an aspect of which there's something personal to be gained. And they beg him that he would leave, that he would depart. They beg Jesus to depart from their region. And now, you know what's really astounding? Is verse 18, the first 4 words. Isn't that amazing? And he was getting into the boat. That's amazing. That's scary. They ask, and he goes. What do they lose in their asking? And he was getting into the boat, and the man who had been possessed. So here we are. We're moving now to the conviction of the demon-possessed man. The man who had been possessed with demons begged him that he might be with him. Did you ever hear that phrase before? That he might be with him. This is chapter 3, verse 14. He went up on a mountain, this is 13. He went up on the mountain and called to him those he desired, and they came to him, and he appointed 12 so that they might be with him. This guy wants to be Jesus' disciple. Isn't that beautiful? This is called creation out of chaos. Do you see it? This man is completely clear about the fact that he had no hope at all. Now, you think, I know this is what we do. We think, well, that guy, he really had it bad. Listen, Ephesians 2 tells you were in the same condition. You were in the same condition. Ephesians 2, you know what it says? You were dead in trespasses and sins. It said you were following who? The prince of the power of the air. Don't you dare look at this demon-possessed man and think that you were any easier to be saved. Both this man and you, it was required for Jesus to go to a cross. It cost God his Son to bring you out of darkness. You know what this man's testimony is going to be? He's going to go and he's going to proclaim the excellencies of Christ, who brought him out of darkness into his great light. He's going to say, I didn't have mercy, but then I got mercy. That's what he's going to proclaim. Isn't that amazing? This is what happens when you know you've been saved. When you know you've been saved, you will not shut up about how much the Lord has done for you. Do you see the conviction that comes when you're saved? Because you were so clear about the darkness. And you know you didn't do anything to get out of it. You were just free. And let me just say, this is not something that you don't regularly also experience at times. And I tell you this because I feel like I'm those disciples in that boat at times. Because I so desperately desire to clearly give you the Word of God. I so desperately desire that. Now, here's the thing. Each week is like this storm to me, okay? I'm like, I don't get it. I'm looking at a passage, what do you want to say to your people about this? I mean, yes, the plain meaning is there, yes. But I want to be held by what it says. What chance have I got to do that? I don't have a chance to do that. In other words, if he doesn't show me grace, if he doesn't move, if I don't come to the passage and say, I don't know that I know you, then I'm leaning possibly on my own understanding. I don't want to come with preconceived ideas to a text. I want to come to a text with the expectation that I need you to free me so I understand it. I have enough fallenness in me to make a passage confusing to you. And I don't want to do that. Well, what chance have I got? I need to be saved. I need Jesus to build conviction in me as to what this passage is about. The question is, who then is this? The answer, it's the one who's done so much for you. That's who this is. That's who Jesus is. So now, what I want you to get from this is I want you to have this kind of conviction of all that the Lord has done for you and all the mercy he's had on you. I want you to have that because that's so freeing. I want you to be alive to God. If you don't feel like you have conviction, if you don't feel like you have the conviction level that you want, try and do something that you think is impossible. Like, for me, it's preaching the word every week. I know that is impossible unless God moves in my life. What would be impossible for you to do? What do you look at and say, you know what, I don't know that I could do that. I don't know that I could share my faith with the clerk at the grocery store. I don't know that I could serve my children with that much grace. I don't know that I could serve, humble myself, and get low enough to do certain things. That's when you pray and you say, hey, I need your help. I beg God. See, this is why I don't think God calls pastors because they're strong. I think he calls pastors because they're weaker than most people. And the reason I say that is because I desperately come. I feel like I'm in this storm, and that God's got to, reveal this to me, or I'm possessed by the world and all my sin and all this kind of stuff. And unless he does something, I don't have anything for you. I don't have anything for you. I don't give you anything. So, as I'm meeting with you, the men's group or the home group and stuff like this, I just want to proclaim to you my inadequacy. Because if you have ever been edified here, sitting here in this front yard, or edified at the men's group, or edified at the home group, or in the ladies group, or any of those things, I want you to understand, that was Christ. Don't confuse it. That's Christ who's doing that for you. And yes, he picks people to do it through. Yes, he does use them. They're gifts to the church. No question. But it's him. Do you know him? And are you under the conviction that he went out of his way to save you? Did he go out of his way to save this demoniac? Yes. You don't go there. You don't go 37 miles in a boat with a storm that may have been a demon-possessed storm. We don't know. Some people speculate. It doesn't really matter. But you don't go all that way and go to a place of tombs with people who are unclean. You ever wonder, why does Jesus tell this guy to go tell how much the Lord has done for him, and yet when he's in his own town, what's he tell people? Don't tell. Well, guess what? You're Gentiles. I'm telling you to go tell. But isn't that interesting? They may have gotten rid of Jesus, but they didn't get rid of Jesus because Jesus is in the message that the demoniac would now bring. Right? You might ask Jesus to leave, but if the gospel's there, Jesus is there, right? You ever think about it? This guy has a day with Jesus. And you think he's starting at a fairly deficient place? Right? I mean, Gentile, probably never even heard of the Old Testament, right? Doesn't have any interest in any of that Judaism stuff. And then he's, on top of it, he's spiritually possessed. Look where he started. Don't you dare think that Christ isn't sufficient to do through you what he did through this man. This man, he goes and he proclaims in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him. None of you had this starting. But let me tell you, I know some of you. And you look back at your life and you say, I know he delivered me. I was broke. I was moving the wrong direction. I didn't like God. I was running from God. I didn't have any interest in God. I was holding on to my alcohol, my women, my love, my idols, and all those things. And that was your story. And you said, who is this? Who is this that came to me as I heard this old book spoken? And then you said, I don't know who this is, but I'm going to find out, right? Isn't that where you're at? I just want to find out who this is. Because I don't want my old life anymore. I want to go and tell how much the Lord has done for me and that he has shown mercy to me. But this is what you got to go through to have conviction. You've got to see your need. There's things in this church that you've thought about doing, or ways that you've thought about serving, that you've underestimated yourself in it. Or I should say, you've overestimated yourself. You think you're too inadequate to disciple somebody. You think you're too inadequate to set up chairs. You think you're too inadequate to meet with people. You think you're too inadequate to lead a small group. You think that. And your confidence is completely in yourself. And that's where the confidence of the guys in the boat wasn't it? Right? The guys in the boat, could they handle the boat? Were they good at boating? Their confidence was in the fact, I can maneuver the sea. And Jesus showed them, you have no idea what you need. You need to know who I am.